Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Nugent, and I'm the state chair of the Tennessee Forward Party. The Forward Party was established in 2022 to serve as an alternative to the Republican-Democrat duopoly. We embrace practical, centrist policies and reject partisan politics. As we like to say, we're neither left nor right, but forward. Today I'm speaking with Lauren Pinkston, who's running to be the next governor of Tennessee. Lauren is running as an independent, but has been endorsed by both the Tennessee Forward Party and the National Forward Party. The purpose of this interview is to give Forwardists and other Tennesseans the opportunity to learn more about Lauren and her campaign. Lauren, thanks so much for getting on the horn with us today. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Nick. Thanks for taking up the mantle and leading the state.
It's my pleasure. So I'm just going to dive right in with some questions, if that's okay, but we can go wherever the vibes take us and feel free to steer the conversation wherever you like. Sound
Sounds
good?
good. Yep.
Excellent. All right, well, let's just start with learning a little bit more about you as a person. We'll start simple. Where do you call home?
Right now, I live in Columbia, Tennessee. This is where my husband and I have been raising our four kids for the last 7+ years. So we have called this home as a permanent address for over 15 years now. But we lived abroad before then, and then I grew up in West Tennessee. So, but as of right now, Columbia, Tennessee is home.
Got it. And you say, other parts of Tennessee, or they're hinted at in your answer, and you describe yourself as a seventh generation Tennessean. Talk a little more about that.
Yeah, we're a complicated bunch, but I grew up in the same town that my mom was raised in, where my grandfather had been a century farmer and had just, really raised in the roots of rural West Tennessee. And so grew up there, moved to Memphis to start my career after college, and then we moved to South Carolina for a short time while my husband was in medical residency. We moved to Southeast Asia after that and grew my family on three continents. So we lived in Uganda for a short time in between there as well. So kind of someone who's chased a lot of dreams and chased a lot of exciting adventures career wise. That has been, just a truly a once in a lifetime opportunity here and there. I can point to incredible experiences that I've had around the world, but moving back to Tennessee became this calling back to the place that raised me. And when we landed back here, I thought, what is this state that I don't recognize anymore? And we can dive into the realities of how Tennessee has changed and where our leadership has failed us in the midst of the growth that we've seen here. But I don't know, more than ever, I think I have come to appreciate Tennessee in a way that I didn't know how
Hmm.
to appreciate it when I was young. And now that I'm about to turn 40, things are much in perspective. And I want the same state that raised me to be the state that raises my kids.
Yeah, sometimes we have to leave a place for a while and then come back to appreciate it or see it in a different light. I myself was just not this isn't my interview, it's not about me, but to
That's
relate,
good.
I was just in Michigan where I lived the first 16 years of my life. I just visited there, and I don't go back there very often, but I'm strangely nostalgic for it, and I have a deep affection for it. Uh, I can understand why people want to live there. I could see myself living there at some point in the future, but seeing it again after leaving for so many years just puts it in a different light.
Well, my husband would say the same thing, having been raised on a dairy farm in Michigan. He moved here when he was 9 after the dairy industry consolidated and his family had to sell out. And so he's still, gotten he still has many fond memories from Michigan. And now that Tennessee is home for both of us, it's I don't know, it's you want to protect it with everything that you have because you
Hmm.
see its beauty.
Absolutely. So, yeah, let's double click into some of the things that you mentioned along the way. Now, as I understand it, you've had a very interesting career arc. You started as an elementary school teacher,
That's
and
right.
then you moved abroad, obviously to some of the countries that you've mentioned. What took you out of the country?
Well, my husband and I were working in vocational ministry. He is, Gavin in medicine, and then myself in international development. So while I was still teaching fourth grade, I started working on a PhD in international development, and I had wanted to study, sociology, study people and behaviors for a long time. And then the classroom just continued to give me that love, seeing all of these little humans that were all wired in such different ways. I wanted to better understand what makes us tick, what makes people behave the way that they do, and
Hmm.
what are the layers of culture that impact that. And so my cultural studies ended up in more of an exploitative field, trying to understand what led people into exploitative work. And so for the last 15 years, I have specifically been working in counter human trafficking efforts and working on the recovery side of that, and prevention and in protection on the other side of exploitation, expanding jobs for survivors of complex traumas and human trafficking. So while we lived overseas, I started several businesses alongside survivors of trafficking, some survivors of religious abuse, and state sanctioned, violence as well. So that was my field there. Then moving back to the U.S., taught in the College of Business at Lipscomb University for several years, and continued my research in expanding healing centered work.
So, what does it mean to combat human trafficking? Obviously, that can run the gamut, but in your case, what did that look like?
Part of it was in prevention, right? So looking at risk populations, and especially for young females who were at risk of being trafficked, working with their families to help them understand what language people might use to coerce young females or families into sending their children abroad, or even to a larger city for that. I held a research desk at the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime when we were writing and consulting on the first anti-trafficking law in the country with the Lao Parliament there. And so I had the joy of having a front row seat to that process. And so, when people say, Lauren, you've never held public office before, that it's true that I haven't run for office since I was in high school as class president, but I have been in and around government work, policy work, sitting in roundtables with even, some of my current competitors in this race. And so I felt that my best use of my skills would be in informing policy, until I reached the point and saw, man, we are not passing any effective legislation because we're so embroiled in this two-party battle that no good policy is being brought. And so the best way that I could serve, and all of the things that I had learned over the years, was to actually get into office and inform legislation that way.
Okay, yeah. So you've anticipated my next question. Well done. That is, what inspired you to seek elected office? And it sounds like, in your case, it was dissatisfaction with the lack of action on certain fronts.
Yeah, I mean, I just am sitting here watching the world just move so quickly, right? Technology has outpaced our ability to legislate it. And as other countries who are more cohesive in their racial makeup, more cohesive in even in their government structures, or even in modern democracies where there are five or six parties, sometimes we're
Hmm.
watching these countries move so far ahead of us in the United States, while we are just dead set on moving backwards. Whether it's this idealistic view of what the 50s or 60s was for us,
Yeah, this
or whether,
nostalgia for
right.
a time that really didn't exist.
Exactly, exactly. And now I'm looking at the next generation thinking, what in the world have we done to serve them and to set them up for success? And so a lot of what I think about really does come from a global understanding of where the United States sits on a global stage right now. But I'm focused on Tennessee, and I'm focused on the issues that are here, and everything that we're seeing in Tennessee politics is a microcosm of our national politics, and what I'm calling a political renaissance that is taking place as the language around party identity is completely reforming, right? There's just this realignment going on in national politics, and we're seeing it here in Tennessee as well.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm understanding now more of the connection between your work abroad and your desire to hold office. It's the fact that you've seen that government can be effective, that it can get stuff done. There's one party in our two-party system seems to think that there's almost no role for government, and the other seems to think that uh, you know government exists to sort of pursue very lofty, unrealistic policies, but government can actually do very effective things. I've seen it myself traveling abroad, and when it's done, it's fantastically boring. It's fantastically
That's
uninteresting,
right.
and it's just
That's right.
it's like the electricity. You just plug it in, plug something in, and it works, and nobody's talking about the amazing, electrons that are flowing through the copper wires. So it sounds like there's an element of that in your experience as well.
Yeah, that's right. My campaign manager for this year was actually a former city councilman here in our town, and he just understands local government so well. He
Hmm.
worked for the South Central Development District and understands the woes between what happens on the ground and at the state level. But he said, Lauren, when I was running for city council, I wanted my campaign slogan to be "Make government boring again," because you're
Yes,
right. Like it's
yes, I would vote for that.
yeah, exactly. When it is working well, you don't notice it, and we all of us, I think, have just felt our nervous systems completely overloaded with the
Hmm.
frustration and the disgust for what we're watching. And we would love to see some boring politicians.
Yeah, I listened to a podcast, this was several years back, where a fellow was asked his mother, grandmother, well, did you and your friends talk about politics when you were my age? And she said, goodness, no, so boring. It was like how I viewed C-SPAN when I was a kid. I wouldn't want to watch C-SPAN, but now it's a spectator sport, and young people, unfortunately, are caught up in that drama rather than just caring about, if they're going to get a date or their driver's license or college or, any other number of things that should concern people of a certain age.
That's right. That's right. And I've got four kids, 16 down to four. And even my 4 year old, he recognizes political signs. Of course, he's used to
As a
being on the
4-year-old
campaign
boy,
as
yeah.
a four. Yeah, he's used to being on the campaign trail with me. But my kids know the names of prevalent politicians. They know the names of their elected officials, and they are, they're constantly asking me, "Mom, are you voting for this person? Do you support this person?
Hmm.
What do we need to know?" And I'll tell you, one of the most proud moments I had as a mom was several years ago, where my daughter was at a doctor's office for an appointment, and for whatever reason, the person caring for her started saying, "I just can't believe that. I can't believe this person think she's just going to run our country into the ground and turn it into a communist country." And mind you, we've actually lived in a communist country.
Right.
And but my daughter looked at her, and instead of being, offended or not knowing what to say, she said, "That's so interesting. Tell me more about why you feel that way."
Oh my
And I
goodness.
and I thought, here's a 12-year-old who knows, better how to engage sometimes than adults do in curiosity and in opening doors for conversation.
I think I'll play the role of Palpatine by saying, we'll watch her career with great interest.
Yeah.
Curious to see what she does in a few years.
She's remarkable.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, let's shift a bit then. Let's talk about your policies. What are some policies that you would like voters to know about?
Well, these are going to be policies that are focused on real kitchen table issues, right? The things that we're all concerned about. And to me, it all comes back to the economy in this season. So what is it that keeps people from being able to afford the lifestyle that they need after really working hard and earning their income? A lot of this comes down to childcare for me. And we're
Hmm.
watching a state with 90,000 childcare slots, a deficit of 90,000
My goodness.
childcare slots in Tennessee. And so focusing on adding 50,000 of those in my first 4 years is of serious importance to me. And I'm not
Hmm.
talking about adding Head Starts across the state, because those are not designed for working families 9 to 2.
Mm.
The hours of 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. do not work for working families. So really focusing on expanding childcare slots on site or near site to industry, to schools. We have a massive shortage of teachers in Tennessee as well, and less
Hmm.
people are graduating with education degrees than ever before in history. And
Yes.
so when you are a young teacher and you're growing your family, that you have to stop your career in order to raise kids, because there's nowhere for them to go. And so focusing on adding some childcare centers as well near public schools, so that teachers can stay there in their classrooms and their kids are nearby. So that's one massive priority for me. um, Education is another concern. So how are we doing after the No Child Left Behind Act? 20 years later, I think the act was well intentioned, and it has left us in a funding crisis, because these were federal mandates that were unfunded, that were passed down just to the state level, but also to the local level. And so we have to repeal some of our excessive testing. Teachers have way more data than they can ever utilize, and they already know which of their students are behind and are not on
Hmm.
track. So pulling back on some of those things and then expanding the kinds of public school offerings that we are giving to students. I know you and I have talked about this in the past because we are we're both professors, but we both care deeply about how our kids are educated. And for my husband and I, we have had our kids in Montessori school and public school and private school and international school and online school, and I even homeschooled for a semester when we were in transition abroad. So we've gotten the experience of many different education environments for our kids, which are all very different. But we should be offering school choice through the public school systems. I hear the desire for school choice all the time, but that is a right that we have through our state constitution, and so looking at how we can really just revitalize the hope and the energy in the public school system is going to be critical for us.
One thing I loved finding on your website, and to people who are listening and watching, do go to Lauren's website. It is impressive array of detailed policies. I think far more detailed than you're likely to see on many uh, candidates' websites. So it's a great way to get to know more about her policy positions. But shifting back to you, Lauren, one of the things that I loved finding on there, it was just red meat for my soul, was your statement about limiting the use of screens in schools, which I could talk for hours just about how important that is. It seemed well intentioned, like No Child Left Behind at the outset, to say, well, let's just throw technology at students. Let's give them screens. Let's give them iPads, and we can't just throw tools at students or technology or teachers and expect it to do the work for them. That takes skill, it takes work, it takes cognitive discomfort. Learning is uncomfortable. We can try to gamify it. Sorry, I'm turning into total preaching mode here, but
It's good.
and I'm maybe superimposing my worldview onto yours, but I think that the time has long come for us to revisit our screen-centric educational environments.
No, well, you're exactly right. And I remember sitting in my living room during COVID when things were shut down, and I watched the school district where my kids are in school and enrolled, and we were applying for laptops and iPads for kids, every child in the district. And that's what we were using the grant money available to us for, knowing good and well that we were not going to be in a digital only environment for very long. And now we have infused our schools with all of these screens, and people feel like they have to use them. And in some school districts, they're required to use them every day.
Hmm.
And I see that this, when I talk to parents, I mean, this is why they're taking their kids out, is because they don't send their kids to school to be on a screen for 6 hours, right? They want their kids to be exploring and building good learning blocks through with their hands, with experiential play. And so this is why we see a lot of families taking an economic hit, so that they can keep their kids home and feel good about the way that they're learning. And so if we want more money in the economy, we have to be investing in education that parents trust. And I just feel that the overinvestment into technology, not that we shouldn't have good tech in schools, but the overinvestment in that technology has significantly put public schools behind where private schools and nature schools and Montessori schools and charter schools and homeschooling, communities have thrived.
Yeah, the polarity has essentially reversed. Maybe 20 years ago, it was the more affluent private schools that had the technology, and it was the less resource-rich schools that had to make do without it. Now, I think that, like I say, the polarity is flipped, where it's the schools that are farther ahead or maybe have more resources that are realizing we're going to have to offer them freedom from technology, whereas the schools that are less resource rich, they have to rely on technology as a crutch. You know, we sent two of our kids to boarding school, and I never thought of myself as someone who would send kids to boarding school, but our sons went to a boarding school, and it was almost entirely because the boarding school promised a technology free or technology minimalist environment. That's how important it was to us.
Right. Well, because, we are seeing what's happening to kids where even with the best firewalls that a school can offer, our kids are getting on Google Slides and they can watch anything on YouTube that they want
Hmm.
unfiltered. They are using Google Docs as texting between their friends. My
Yeah.
girls are 13 and 16. They don't have phones yet. We are some of the last holdouts.
Good for
And
you. Good for you.
it's, just something that's so important that I'm not going to feel pressure to put something in the hands of my kids that
Yeah.
is going to put them at risk when developmentally they're not in a place to be able to make all of those decisions on their own. Am I coaching them through that? Do I allow them to to watch videos that I've saved for them in a special album on Instagram that I think that they will find funny. Absolutely. And they love cuddling up with me and watching funny videos,
Yeah,
that I have saved, but I have filtered those and I have decided, what they should be exposed to. And I just I don't love the idea of a free reign for 6 or 7 hours during the school day with it where they can just access absolutely anything.
100%, 100%. And then another technology related subject, you recently called for a moratorium on building new data centers in Tennessee. Can you unpack some of your reasons for that?
Of course. So there is a massive distrust in the loss of farmland in Tennessee and that farmland being lost to data centers. The thing that we love here is our space, our wide open spaces, the beauty of our landscape. And every time that we lose some of that to a housing development or lose some of that to an industrial, building, people are rightfully upset. So that's why I came into this race with a plan for how we could deal with the growth of data centers, and we can talk about that as well. But until we have a plan that people have spoken into, especially people in rural areas where they are disproportionately at risk of having, being overrun by a data center, then we need to put a pause on this so that we have a statewide plan, and that plan is airtight. If you're going to come to Tennessee and you're going to be adding to our growth, you need to be paying for that growth. And so the last thing that I want is anyone in Tennessee having to have their electrical bill or their water bill go up because we didn't do a good job of managing our growth. Growth should always pay for growth, not the people who have been living here for 200 years in the same community where their ancestors were raised.
Yeah, and as someone who used to work for big tech for first Microsoft and then later Amazon and has toured these massive data centers, I can say that they're very thinly staffed. It does not take many people to run a data center, and most of the people who are operating it are sitting at computers elsewhere. So, I wouldn't say I'm an expert on the economics of data centers, but I understand the concern that, in the old days, building a massive factory, yes, that certainly took away from the land, but it also employed many people and it brought tax revenue, it brought other benefits. Data centers, I think the case is far more complicated, ambiguous, and maybe even dubious.
Sure, I agree. And there are great things that we could do with the money that they bring in. There are great things we could do with the tax revenue that they bring in. There's wonderful things that we could do for electricians. It's a great job for electricians, and we've invested in our TCATs and, our Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology. And I think that
Hmm.
that's wonderful. But we need to do it in a way that, again, makes sense. That's why you hear me say a lot, I want to, invest in the research that will show that these data centers can go underground. They can be, we can trap the thermal heat that they emit. We can channel that above ground and heat greenhouses and use modern vertical farming techniques to make sure that we are supplying our local communities with more produce and agricultural products. I think we can solve this problem with one stone hitting three or four different birds, if you will. But I just want to make sure that we have a good plan for how to do that, because many of our local county commissions are sucked dry for money and for resources. And so when a company comes in and is dangling tax revenue over their heads, it's almost too hard to turn down.
Yeah, and what I hear you saying and what I read from your statement is it's not a firm, absolute opposition to data centers. It's a let's get our policy house in order first, and let's make sure that the incentives are properly aligned. Is it
That's
fair?
right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, you are utilizing a data center somewhere. If you are tapping anywhere on your phone, if you ordered groceries on Walmart, today, or if you are utilizing technology at all, you are also benefiting from a data center. But the concern that I have is that these companies, data companies now own a third of the stock market in just 7 companies alone, and so I'm concerned that the amount of wealth that we are freely handing over with our behaviors that are captured by these companies and then stored and resold in the form of data, that we are not benefiting from it as the users. And so we need to have a very robust conversation about how we move into the future of tech, making sure that the people who are enriching corporations are not being sucked out to where we lose the middle class because of it.
And I think that's of a piece with you. And I'm going to paint the picture that I see of you, but please do finesse this if I've mischaracterized in any way. Obviously, you've chosen not to run as either a Democrat or a Republican. And I think that's because you don't fit into either bucket. For example, you support some policies that are typically associated with the political right, such as lower taxes in some circumstances, expanding nuclear energy. And likewise, you support some policies that are more traditionally associated with the political left, such as universal background checks and criminal justice reform. You strike me as someone who comes across as a non-ideological pragmatist. Would you say it's a fair characterization?
Yes, I hope so. I mean, I don't want to owe anyone anything except for people that are at the voting ballot box. And I think that the special interest groups that have controlled our politics, especially since the Supreme Court decision of Citizens United, we have lost control in this country. Citizens have lost control, and corporations have taken that control. Now, you're not going to see me walking around saying tax the rich, because I believe that we should have incentives for innovation. And when we cap what someone can make based off of their own innovation, I think that we really lose out as an entrepreneurial society. But at the same time, we can't just have a free reign and allow for corporations to buy out all of our politicians so that they're the only ones benefiting.
And so running, though, as an independent, as you are, obviously introduces some headwinds. You don't have the backing and the more importantly the finances of the major political parties. So tell us a little bit more about the challenges of running an independent and your what you see as your path to winning this race.
I've had to build this entire thing, Nick, from the ground up. I called every organization and every political strategy firm on both sides of the aisle that was reputable before I started this race, and asked if they would work with me, and they all said no. They said it would kill their business plan. And so
Really?
they were like, we like you, and we know that the system is broken, but we can't take that financial risk. And that has been the story over and over and over again.
I'm
People
sorry
who
to interrupt,
have
but
Mhm.
help me understand that a little bit more. So these are consulting firms or who would theoretically advise either Republicans or Democrats for money, right? Money has a magical way of smoothing over ideological differences, but they weren't willing to even take your money to work with you or to help you in any
Correct.
way.
Correct.
Why would that hurt their business?
Because they only work with Democrats or only work with Republicans.
I
And
see.
they were afraid that the Republican connections that they had or the Democratic connections that they had would water down their purity tests, you know.
Mm.
So it would hurt them financially.
Well, if there's
Yeah,
one thing we
just
need more of in this nation, it's more purity tests, more
right. Those are get
absolutism.
Yeah, that's getting us so far. That's doing so well for us.
But I interrupted you. Please continue with telling us again what it's taking you to build this campaign from the ground up.
Well, the next thing is the voter file, right? And actually, I would say that this has been an advantage for us rather than a disadvantage for us. The voter file for the state of Tennessee is available to anyone. But as we start parsing through that, we are looking for people who would be in our affinity for voting independent. And we know that the majority of Tennesseans are independents now. Nationwide, the majority of voters are independents now. And
Yeah,
so
they are.
there's great data on on that. However, there was zero data on where people are on issues when they do identify as independent.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of this campaign, I started a massive statewide listening, campaign of just asking people, well, how do you feel about XYZ, right? So we talked about ICE, we talked about income tax, we talked about uh, different rights around marriage equality, right? So we talked about all of the divisive issues until honestly before long I started hitting what in the research world what we would call saturation, but where the answers were pretty well the same on every issue. And that helped me just know that where I was as a person was not at all far off from where Tennesseans were. And
Yeah.
so
Most
it
people are
gave
in the
me
center.
it's true. It's true. So we launched the campaign on November 22nd. I did dozens of events through January. And at the end of January, I launched almost 100 policy positions. And I spent a big bulk of the month of January writing all of those myself, did not use
Hmm.
AI. If
Good for you.
anyone is wondering if those policy positions on my website were handwritten, they absolutely were. And so but the beauty of that was that I just got to say what I really believed. And I didn't have to code any of my language. And I just got to lay it out exactly like I saw it and know that that's where the majority of Tennesseans were as well. So it's been really fun to hear feedback from people to say, I don't ever remember hearing from a politician where I agreed with them on so many things.
Yeah.
And that's been really hopeful.
That's fantastic. So you've talked about the hard work you're putting in, and I can attest to that. I've seen your schedule. You don't sleep apparently, or if you do, it's a mystery how you do. So you, kudos to you for all of the shoe leather that you're scraping off, and
Thank you.
but just again on the pragmatics here, your likely Republican opponent, Marsha Blackburn, has a lot of money and name recognition. What's the path to winning this race?
775,000 votes. There are some things that you can buy. Name recognition is one of those, and we are working on that for sure because name ID is important. But you cannot buy someone's affection and you cannot buy someone's trust. And if there's one thing that she does not have, it is trust
Hmm.
and affection. And so there were several calculations that we made when I stepped into this race, Nick. And if I can be perfectly transparent, because I've got nothing but the truth to tell at this
We'll
point,
take the truth in
uh,
emergencies.
there was a strong assumption that she would win the Republican primary. And then what people don't understand is that in a state like Tennessee, where we had the lowest voter turnout in the last midterm election, we are looking at the likelihood of 11 to 14% of the entire state voting in the August 6th primary. And then
Wow.
in that primary, you're going to have two-thirds of those people who vote as Republicans. And then the people who vote as Republicans are going to split three ways to vote for their candidates. And so you are going to have the winner of the primary walking away probably with 5 to 6% of the popular vote
That's unbelievable.
and then walking directly into the governor's residence because they have an R beside their name. And I said, that is the most undemocratic thing I can imagine. And I cannot let that happen. So we needed a way to push back against that assumption. And the best thing that I could do and resist was to run as an opponent to
Hmm.
that.
Yeah, I can understand that. So let's shift now to the optimist case here. So, um, let's say you do win. How do you intend to govern? How would you describe your governing style?
So there's two policies that I'd like to share with people. I have a soft policy promise and a hard policy promise. The soft policy promise is that with children in the governor's residence, which we have not had since the 1970s when Lamar Alexander was
No
our
kidding.
governor. Yeah.
Wow.
We will still be having family dinners together, and those family dinners will include a Democrat and a Republican and their families eating with us. We're not allowed to talk
Fantastic.
about policies. We're just talking about each other as humans because we cannot effectively legislate on the floor of the house if that is the only time that we are talking to each other is when we're
Yeah.
yelling at each other about a particular law. That is a non-negotiable for me that we start to humanize each other. On a hard policy standpoint, I will be deploying a tool from the governor's residence and from the governor's office, a legislative accountability tool, because the Tennessee Constitution does not really allow for many ballot initiatives. So on an issue like vouchers, private school vouchers, for example, no one was really asked. We were all calling our legislators, telling them what we felt about those vouchers, but no one was listening. And so those calls will be recorded through the governor's office. We will put those issues on our website, and in real time, you will be able to see on divisive issues where people fall out on those issues. And I'll be sending those reports to all 33 senators, all 99 representatives each week. Because if you are going to send a bill to my desk that does not align with the will of the people, I'm going to need an explanation.
Great. All right. Let's say January 16th, 2027 sees you sworn in as the 51st governor of Tennessee. I think I got my number right.
That's correct.
What is your first act in office?
The first act in office is to strike through that school voucher budget line item and start investing in early childhood education. That's very important to me, and so I know that some people will be upset to hear that, but we have a responsibility to the children of the future, and so that's line item. That's executive action number one. Other than that, it is kind of starting to set the precedent and sit our legislators down and let them know that the rules are changing and our governing style is changing.
No
And
more
I
hardball
will,
politics the way we've
we're
seen
not,
it recently.
we're not doing that. And if you want to continue to play that way, then I will continue to bring and prop up citizens councils across the state and make sure that people who want to have their voice heard that it is heard, and we will use the bully pulpit of the governor's residence over and over and over again to make sure that the power really does lie in the hands of the people.
Fantastic. Well, we at the Forward Party are obviously big fans, and that's why we've chosen to endorse you. But why did you choose to align with the Forward Party?
I was looking for a place where I could land and to be surrounded by people who had truly the future of the country at heart. And I will say that the founders of the Forward Party were ahead of their time, but they saw what was happening, as a
Hmm.
microcosm of a larger kind of unraveling of the political system. And, Nick, I think that you are a student of history like I am. We see things like this happen every 80 years. There's kind of a
Yeah.
cycle, right? That happens historically.
Generations forget that are they say it's a two-generation lapse in memory.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so before you and I were born, this was felt. And then looking backwards about 80 years, we see kind of a realignment of some of our national priorities,
Hmm.
things that led to the fall of the stock market and some policies that we had to put in place to protect the Federal Reserve in the United States. 80 years before that, we had the Civil War. And we had another
Yeah,
third party candidate that was elected and saved our union. And so, this is not unprecedented. It's just the fact that in our generation, we haven't seen it. And so it's time for us to define what this political renaissance means for our era and how do we stand as faithful witnesses to the ideals that our founding fathers had and define what it means going forward. That's our role. And well, if I had to put an exclamation point on something today, it's something I just told my campaign manager on the phone. When people look at me and they say, "Why would you not run as a Democrat?" or say, "Why would you not run as a Republican?" And then they want to criticize me for running as an independent. I just say, "Why in the world would I why would I not stand up for what was right in a moment
yeah.
that demands people standing up for what's right?" So this is our time, and it was the right thing to do to stand up and stand out.
Yeah, and the parties, the two major parties have a homogenizing effect. They take people who do want to stand on principle, who do want to be bipartisan, who want to compromise, who want to borrow from both sides, who want to be civil, and they just grind them through the machine and turn them into caricatures. There's so I won't name names, but some of the people that we would now all recognize as being some of the avatars of the far right or the far left came to office on promises of being very pragmatic, reasonable moderates. And, was that cynical? Maybe. Maybe it was that's who they really were, but the system just has a way of uh, brainwashing you. And so
Mhm.
as tough as the row is that you have to hoe, it's sounds like the right one to uh, keep your principles intact.
Well, it's who I am. It's who I've always been. And I have made multiple decisions in my career where I was standing alone, and it led to me losing a position, or it led to me, ruffling feathers that with people who had employed me or people who were expecting me to fall in line. And I cannot. I refuse to lose sleep over compromising my values. And so, if that means that I'm standing alone, but I'm standing on what's right, then I'll stand alone all day long. But the reality is that I am not standing alone in this race. There are thousands of Tennesseans who are hungry for authentic leadership, and it is proof in the tears that I see at our events. It is proof in the hugs that I am given. And two people stopped by an event on Saturday in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, just to pray over me.
Hmm,
Just
sweet.
people of deep faith that just see me for what we're working on, and continue to just fill my cup. And so that I realize I'm not alone, right? We are the answer to our problem. And so we can't just continue to wait for something magical to happen. We have to manifest it. We have to create it.
Absolutely. Well, is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have, or anything else you wanted to say?
Well, let's just remind people that this is a grassroots effort, and we are number 4 in fundraising in the state when it comes
Amazing.
to candidates in this race, and we are not slowing down at all. We are working so hard every day to get the word out, but there's two things that people can do besides getting involved and volunteering on the campaign. Number one is word of mouth. That's in marketing terms, that is the best kind of marketing that you can have is someone telling you about a product that they really like. And so here I am, I'm your product. Tell somebody that you like what you see and what you hear. Number two is of course investing. And I think we have the greatest promise with the highest ROI with the smallest investment of any campaign in the country this year. We have a race that has the lowest energy of any governor's race I've ever seen in my lifetime in Tennessee. And so to invest here and to help us get the word out, I think we have the most winnable independent race in the nation with the tiniest amount of investment. And so anything that you can give to help us get the word out is huge, because we don't have to convince people. Once they hear about us, once they meet me, it's the easiest sell ever. And so just helping us get that word out will be huge.
Absolutely. Do donate to Lauren's campaign. It would be a good investment. Lauren Pinkston, it's been a delight chatting with you. You obviously have the Forward Party's full support, and we wish you every success in your campaign. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. And thanks to those who've watched or listened to this interview. If you'd like to learn more about the Forward Party, you can visit the website at forwardparty.com/Tennessee and join our mailing list. You can also donate to the cause, and we're very considerate. We won't turn away your money. If you'd like to get involved, just email us at tennessee@forwardparty.com and we'll find a place for you. Until next time, I'm Nick Nugent, and this has been a presentation of the Tennessee Forward Party. Take care.